Before working on your vehicle, always raise and secure it to the frame with properly rated jack stands or automotive hoist according to the vehicle manufacturer's recommendations and procedures. For safety, the installer and all vehicle drivers must review the complete set of print version installation instructions and heed all the included cautions and warnings. Today, we're working on a 2014 Ford F150 and we'll be installing 1.5 to 2-inch Add-A-Leaf kit. Most Mostro suspension Add-A-Leaf kits install similarly with premium components designed specifically for your make, model, and generation of vehicle. Follow these instructions as a general guide and defer to the vehicle manufacturer's recommended procedures and torque specifications when applicable. Using the manufacturer's recommended procedure, support the vehicle's frame with jack stands or a frame contact lift. Raise the rear of the vehicle so the rear wheels are off the ground. Remove the rear wheels. To aid in the ease of installation and also prevent possible damage to these components during later steps, it is recommended and may be necessary to remove, relocate, or disconnect some or all of the cables, lines, wires, or brackets attached between the vehicle frame and axle assembly. Disconnect the parking brake from the rear frame bracket by pulling out the parking brake cable by hand, then clamping it at the front to keep it slack. Unbolt and remove the rear parking brake frame bracket and separate the driver and passenger cables at their junction bracket. Disconnect the hard brake line brackets from the top side of the axle housing. Unbolt the upper brake line bracket from the frame. Pull down lightly until the bracket tab can sit just under the frame rail. Lightly contact the center axle housing with a jack. Remove both the driver and passenger side lower shock bolts. Loosen the passenger side axle U-bolts just until they can be wiggled slightly by hand. Verify that the axle center is supported securely on the jack. Only then remove the driver side axle U-bolts and lower U-bolt plate. It is recommended to double-check the fitment of the Add-A-Leaf in length and width at this time. If there is any clamp or bracket that looks like it might interfere with the Add-A-Leaf installation, please contact our tech line for assistance before proceeding. Using 6-inch or larger jaw metal C-clamps, firmly clamp the spring leaves on the driver's side spring pack at both ends. Flat overlead leaves should not be included in this step of the clamping assembly. Lower the jack slowly, allowing the driver's side axle spring pad to drop away from the leaf spring pack. During this step, it is critical to prevent overextension of any lines, wires, or cables that may still be attached. About 6 or more inches of clearance from the spring pack bottom to the axle spring pad will be necessary. Use a locking adjustable wrench to hold the spring center pin bolts from the bottom. Remove the nuts, center pins, and overload springs from the clamped spring pack. Caution: do not remove the C-clamps during this step. The clamped spring assembly is under considerable compression. A helping hand or ratchet strap wound firmly around the entire spring pack several times will hold everything in place as you proceed through this step. Remove the overload spring and the upper spring U-bolt plate. Inspect the Add-A-Leaf springs to ensure they have their Teflon pads in place on both ends. Check the hardware quantity and compatibility with the existing spring assembly. Realign the upper spring plate with the suspended spring assembly. Using the supplied long center pins, attach the overload spring under the new Add-A-Leaf spring up into the spring pack. For extra clearance, shift the axle assembly forward a few inches out of the way to allow the new long center pins to slide up into the spring pack. Shift and realign each leaf as necessary by tapping on the sides and ends lightly. Attach the new center pin nuts to the top of the center pins. Only install the spring nuts to a few pounds of torque just to hold everything in place. Do not fully torque these at this time. Reposition the C-clamps towards the center of the spring pack, including the new Add-A-Leaf. Screw the C-clamps with enough pressure to clamp down the spring pack assembly about 1/2 inch. Then, tighten the center pin nuts to clamp an additional 1/2 inch. Repeat and continue alternating the sequence until the spring packs are fully clamped. Then final torque the center pin nuts to 90 foot-pounds. Raise the axle until the spring center pins are seated into the driver's side spring pad. Install the driver's side lower spring plate and U-bolts. Tighten nuts until the U-bolts can only be wiggled slightly by hand. Install the driver's side lower shock and bolt. Torque to the factory recommended specifications. Repeat the add-a-leaf process on the passenger side. After completion of both the driver and passenger side add-a-leaf springs, torque all U-bolts to the factory recommended specifications or aftermarket brand specifications, if equipped. Trim all the new center pins down to a few exposed threads using a metal blade saw or cutting wheel. Reinstall all lines, cables, wires, and brackets that were removed during the disassembly. This includes the line and bracket on top of the axle housing, the top frame bracket back on the frame rail, and reattaching and bolting the parking brake cable back into place. Remove the clamp holding that brake cable, which should allow it to slide and be pulled back into place. Install the rear wheels. Torque to the factory recommended specifications or aftermarket brand specifications if equipped. Remove all jack stands and lower vehicle to the ground. Before test driving, check for the proper function of the emergency brake and brake pedal. If there is any difference from their safe function, you must inspect, diagnose, and fix any issues before proceeding. Once the vehicle has been inspected and tested for safe brake function, it can be test-driven cautiously. Slow initial starts and stops should be attempted before progressing to the test drive. If there is any unusual noises or sensations while starting, stopping, or turning, you must terminate the test immediately to inspect, diagnose, and fix any issues. Since Mostro is prefabricated for the installer's ease and the end user's peace of mind, Mostro products are vehicle-specific. Consult our website at nationaldrivetrain.com for vehicle compatibilities. Got questions? Planning a build and need help? Call, email, or comment below. We'd be happy to help.